So, hello everybody and welcome to this webinar arranged by the Swedish Parliament's Cycling Network in association with Swedish Cycling. How the Netherlands will get even more people cycling is the topic of today's webinar. And we will speak English today as we have a couple of distinguished guests here from the Netherlands. We will hear from the President of the European Cyclists Federation, Mr. Henk Swarttouw. I hope I pronounced that quite somewhat right. And you are a former ambassador of Denmark and also in Finland from the Dutch. And you live in Helsingborg at the moment. Very warm welcome. And we will also hear from Dr. Lucas Harms from the Dutch Cycling Embassy, a well-known researcher in cycling policy. And also from nobody less than the Deputy Program Manager of the Dutch Bicycling Policy at the Dutch Ministry of Water and Infrastructure Management, Mr. Erik van den Eijnden. Very warm welcome to all of you. You will start with a presentation on how you aim to increase cycling by 20% until 2027, so that's over 10 years. And after that, we will have a Q&A with a couple of MPs from the Swedish Parliament. And that is Jens Holm from the Left Party, Abraham Halef, Social Democrats, Maria Stockhaus, Moderate Party, Patrik Jönsson, Swedish Democrats, Anders Åkesson, Center Party, Jakob Forssmed, Christian Democrats, Helena Gellerman, Liberals, and Emma Berginger from the Green Party. And if you in the audience have questions here today, please post them in the comments. We will have some time, perhaps in the end, to answer them. This webinar will formally end at 1 o'clock, but the presenters here today have been kind enough to say that they could stay for a few longer if we have some more questions. For those who'd like to stay. My name is Emil Svala. I'm the secretary of the Parliament's Cycling Network, and one of the members of our steering committee is Jessica Thunander. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Yes, hi, my name is Jessica Thunander, as Emil said, and I'm MP from the Left Party. On behalf of the Parliamentarian Network for Bicycling, I welcome you all to this webinar on bicycling and bicycle infrastructure in the Netherlands. And of course, a special welcome to our Netherlandic guests. We are living amidst a climate emergency and have to convert our ways of transportation. Bicycling should be a big part of that change. 27% of all travels in the Netherlands are done by bicycle, and the country is famous for its bicycling possibilities and an inspiration for other countries. Even so, the national goal is to increase bicycling by 20% during the next 10 years. And we will now hear about how Netherlandic authorities are working towards the realization of that goal and how it affects other road users. There will also be a discussion with members of the Swedish Parliament, as Emil already said, and time for questions in the end. We hope to learn and have inspiration from how the Netherlands are working with increased bicycling and safer infrastructure, and have ideas for our work to increase bicycling and safety also in Sweden. We welcome you all to this interesting webinar and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And I will also just say hello to Claes Elm, because Swedish Cycling is working in association with the Cycling Network, and you are its managing director. Hello, Claes.
Hello, and hello, everybody. I just want to say welcome from the Swedish Cycling, the Swedish advocacy organization in Sweden. And I want to welcome all participants, all 100 of you, and all the Swedish politicians, and of course a special welcome to our international guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Claes. And I'm leaving the word now to Henk Swarttouw of the European Cyclists Federation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Emil, and thank you all, riksdagsledamöter, for spending your lunch break with us on cycling. I just wanted to introduce myself. I was recently elected president of the European Cyclist Federation, which is the European umbrella organization for cyclists all over Europe. Our Swedish member is Cykelfrämjandet, and similar organizations all over Europe constitute our members. We have an office in Brussels where about 20 people are working there, where we try to lobby for cycling at the European level with the European institutions, European Parliament, European Commission, but also what we try to do is to promote cycling all over Europe and to learn from each other's experiences. So therefore we think events like this one organized by Svenska Cykelstäder och Regioner are very much supported by us. Final thing I would like to say is yesterday we were in Vienna, virtually in Vienna, with more than 50 ministers of transport, health and environment from 50 different countries, where the pan-European master plan for cycling promotion was adopted, and where the ministers from all these countries promised to double cycling in Europe by the year 2030. And that is what we hope to work towards with you and with parliaments and governments all over Europe. I stop here and I give the floor to the real specialists from the Netherlands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henk. That's great news from Vienna. I will let the floor now to Lucas.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Fantastic to be here. I'm going to share my screen. And together with Erik van Eijnden, I will give a presentation about the Dutch National Cycling Policy. I will give a short intro and then Erik will take over. My name is Lucas Harms. I'm the Managing Director of the Dutch Cycling Embassy. I will very shortly tell something about cycling in the Netherlands, some general introduction. But first, who are we? What is the Dutch Cycling Embassy? The Dutch Cycling Embassy is a public-private network, a collaboration between the national government and 80 organizations, a public-private collaboration. You see the different logos of the people that are, the organizations that are collaborating with us on this slide. And what we basically do is we translate the best practices, the experience, the expertise, and the knowledge that we have been developing in the Netherlands for the last 40 or 50 years to various countries and cities around the world. And then why cycling? Maybe that's a very obvious question. I think it's very important to stress here that cycling is not should not be a goal in itself, but it's a very, very powerful transformational tool, not only to bring more sustainability around the world. So it's a fantastic part of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's also a transformational tool in the sense that it delivers more social, more safe, more wealthy, more healthy, and more happy places to be. So in that sense, we truly believe, and also based on our experience, that this transformational power of cycling that can be really empowering and boost cities around the world to become much better places. Why then the Netherlands? As already noted before, the Netherlands is a cycling country in par excellence, and we have, as was noted before, more than 25% of all the daily trips that are made are by bicycle. We have more bikes in the Netherlands than people, 23 million bikes on a population of 17 million inhabitants. And it's totally embedded and ingrained in our daily activity patterns. So people use the bike for many different daily activities. And that's not because we are born with a bike, of course. It's because we have a fantastic network of a separated bike infrastructure. We have a dense network of over 37,000 kilometers of fully separated bike infra, which is a quarter of the total network of road network of the Netherlands. And a great deal of all this infrastructure was built in the last 20 or 30 years, but new routes are being added every single day. The Dutch also cycle because they've tamed the motor vehicle through the design of our streets. So it's not only about separating separated bike infra, it's also about traffic calm streets, and a staggering 80% of all our urban streets have been redesigned to be local access streets, traffic calm to a speed of up to 30 km an hour, where pedestrians and bikes have main access, and cars are being triggered as guests. So more than separated infra, this creates slow, safe streets, which are perfect for cycling conditions. And of course, it's also due to the fact that the government is really spending and investing in improving cycling conditions. On average, astonishing 30 euros per person per year, so per capita. And of course, my colleague Erik will tell much more about the national cycling policy, but it's really important to stress that it's a fantastic national ingredient of our policy and has been so for years in the past. But, and that I think is very important to stress, the Netherlands has not always been a cycling paradise. As you can see in this graph, in the 50s and 60s of the last century, the numbers, the modal share of cycling went down and down due to the fact that more people became aware and became owners of cars, and our urban streets became more congested, more polluted, and more unsafe every year. Up to the early 70s, when we had a real traffic safety crisis with more than 3,500 people being killed in traffic every year, amongst them also a lot of kids, more than 400 kids. And this led to different mass demonstrations, and what we call the Stop the Child Murder movement, the Stop the Kindermoord beweging, we called it in Dutch. And people really demanded change. They demanded more space for cyclists and pedestrians and a redesign of our streetscapes. During the same years, the Netherlands was target of an oil embargo. So cars became more expensive to use. So people had to reacquaint themselves with the bicycle again. On top of this came the national government's car-free Sunday policy. And suddenly the unsafe avenues were totally quiet again, and people became part of the public realm. So this was sort of an eye-opening moment in Dutch history when residents realized they could not take safe cycling for granted unless their car-centric design of their streets would be dramatically transformed. And so this really triggered a change, and from the mid-70s onwards, we have been invested in the redesign, the reshaping and reforming of our streetscapes. And this is, of course, what is happening now in many cities around the world with, due to COVID, lots of pop-up bike lanes and temporary conditions. We have had the same since the 70s, have been redesigning and experimenting and moved from pop-up to permanent cycling conditions. So the Dutch Cycling Embassy and our network can help out. We provide a lot of hardware, software, and orgware ingredients, so to say. The hardware ingredients composed to the redesign of the streetscapes themselves, the material conditions. The software relates to the marketing, communication, education, and the sort of behavioral or the mindware elements that are needed in place. And the orgware relates to the organizational elements, how to bring stakeholders together, the governance elements. All those three elements are, I think, of very much importance. And with this, I would like to give over the floor to Erik, who is going to say more about the national cycling policies.
Okay, thank you, Lucas, for this nice, good introduction. I will tell more about also how we do this in the Netherlands. The orgware and software leading also to more cycling infrastructure. Next, please. So already told, I think everyone cycles in the Netherlands. You can see here some examples. Even the police has cycling as a way of transportation. Next, please. And maybe also more for you to know, also our minister and prime minister left in the top cycles to work or to the king. And you see also the royal family uses it quite often. So it's really for everyone, I could say. Next, please. I would like to give you some insight in how we plan this infrastructure in general, but especially for the bicycle infrastructure. And I also will tell something about how we cooperate on the national level with a lot of different parties to do this. And I finish with the most recent national cycling policy issues. Next, please. Like a lot of countries in the 50s, it's coming together with also the rise of the car. We made a national car highway scheme you can see here. And actually we're still working on this plan. So it's years and years working on this plan. And next slide, please. This gives also like the context that in the 80s of last century, we made on the national level a Dutch bicycling master plan. So yeah, you could say we copy paste and did it also for this. It's in the same time also with Stop the Child Murder, like Lucas explains. That's quite logic maybe. Next please. But as I think everywhere things change, and you also have in governmental perspective changes of who does what. And in the 19th, the cycling policy in the Netherlands was from also the national level more and more decentralized to the provincial and the local level. And nowadays, the local municipalities are the most important government layer responsible for cycling infrastructure. Next, please. But what we see is also that even it's on local and some regional level, also on the national level, there was momentum in 2015 to do more. It was also the year that in the Netherlands, the French Tour de France started in the city of Utrecht. And it gave a lot of inspiration. It's a bit about the Eurovision Song Contest, could have been also like nowadays, but then for cycling. And we saw that not only the city, but people and the country was really enthusiastic about cycling. And it saw also that cycling was not only cycling, but it has a lot of advantages for a lot of other things. So all these parties you see here, they worked together with the different government layers to found a new organization, Tour de Force, we call it. Next slide, please. And what this Tour de Force parties did is they made an ambition for the whole country together with all the parties. And this is the ambition you already explained in the beginning, Emil, from the 20% more cycling kilometers in 10 years' time. And they made agendas for that. Next slide, please. Also, my current state secretary joined this Tour de Force alliance. And this was in 2020 with the second phase. And I will explain also why it was quite logic for her to do that. Next, please. The government we still have now in the last days, they started in 2017 and they put also a bicycle in their statement what they would work on for the next 4 years. In this 4 years, also the National Climate Agreement was brought up, and also on this agreement, the cycling was seen as an example how things could be bettered. And this together made that the next slide, please. Our state secretary said, I will, for myself, for the national perspective, will have this goal for the coming 4 years to get 200,000 extra kilometers of a bike. So that's what she signed for. Next, please. And yeah, you cannot do this alone from the national perspective. We are in The Hague and yeah, you have to do it on the ground, we say. So she formed a group of 17 cycling ambassadors, different organizations who share this goal to get people who work for them getting on the bike to their work. So this is a way of working together also to share our ambition with their ambitions and make it work in practice. Next, please. And here you see these cycling ambassadors and our state secretary in the middle. They come together once a year to talk how things are going. And this is a way of working together. Next, please. And then coming also a bit to the end is that this orgware and how we do things also leads to more cycling hardware and infrastructure, because in the coalition agreement, in the climate agreement, there was also money reserved for expanding cycling infrastructure in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. And these are the amounts of money which were provided for it. From the national perspective, it's the two above. But what's the way of doing things in the Netherlands that you have to work together as a different layers of government. So what actually happened is that with the national money made available, also local and regional governments co-funded to expand the work for the cycling infrastructure. So it tops up almost to €500 million in these 4 years. Next slide, please. And What also is done is that we are working quite a long time already on infrastructure, but actually there was not yet a real vision how the network should look like in 2040. So our state secretary said, together with this involved local and regional governments, that we should work on such a plan, like I showed also in the beginning of the national highway plan, that we have to make this for the Dutch cycling network. Not only the routes, but also important in the Netherlands, parking your bicycle in a city or at a train station is quite a problem. Some maybe have been to Amsterdam and have seen some of these problems. This is also part of this plan. So to sum up, next please is, I hope we get a good example of what we try to do, but for us it's also very good to hear what you are doing in Sweden and how we can learn from you. So I hope we not only get questions, but we can have also some interaction to learn from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for a great presentation. I will give the word to Jens Holm, who is the president of the traffic committee in the parliament and from the Left Party. Hello, Jens.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon. It's after lunch. Thank you very much for these presentations. Very inspiring, I must say. And I think we in Sweden, we can learn a lot from our Dutch colleagues. First and foremost, I would like to stress that we need to plan our cities differently. In Sweden and in all over the world, we have planned our cities based on the needs for the cars. We need to plan our cities based from the needs of the pedestrians and cyclists. We need to convert car space to space for green areas, for pedestrians, for more cycling. And I think we have a fantastic opportunity with the pandemic. The pandemic is awful in many respects, but what we have seen during the pandemic is that all means of transport have declined, but cycling, actually in many countries we have seen that people have used bikes as a mode of transport. And so has the case been in Sweden too, especially in the bigger cities. In many cities in Europe, we see how politicians and city planners work actively to convert car space to bike space with the pop-up biking lanes that was mentioned here. They have very proactive policies in cities like Paris, Milan, Barcelona, etc. Unfortunately, we don't really see that active process here in Sweden. I would like to see that. We need to invest more in cycling infrastructure. And at the moment, we are working with the national infrastructure proposition from the government. And unfortunately, there is not enough money, there is not enough space in that document for using cycling as a mode of transport. I think also what we can learn from the Netherlands is to put a target to increase the daily trips by bike. You are already on 25%. Actually, myself and my party, we say that let's put 25% as the national target for the daily trips on bike. If we have a target, at least we have a goal. We know where we are heading. Without a goal, we don't really know where we're heading. So it's very important to put a political target for that.
Jens, time is
yes,
running short.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have a question to the presenters?
Yes, my question would be if you have changed your policies, your way of working with increased cycling in the Netherlands due to the pandemic. Can you see the pandemic also as an opportunity to use cycling even more than before? And what have you done based on the pandemic situation? Thank you. Sorry for taking too much time.
Shall I try to do this? And souffle me, Lucas and Henk. We saw also, for instance, that we had a target of 200,000 extra commuters to work. Well, while the pandemic, also in the Netherlands, people work at home. So this target was, of course, in this time a bit strange and difficult. But what we see is actually that people who still had to go to work because they cannot work at home, they use more than normal the bike, also in the Netherlands. And what we see is that this change of behavior, which is always quite hard because, yeah, how can you change someone's behavior? It has been done. We want to keep this on this level for the people who did this when the Corona crisis is gone. So it's also a starting point for this national vision of 2040 that it's getting more busy and busy on the cycling paths in the Netherlands. And this together is maybe our second stage of improving our cycling infrastructure. So like the first stage was maybe in the 1780s, a starting point, and maybe this is the next tipping point. But we, of course, will know this when we look back in 10 or 20 years.
Thank you so much, Erik. Okay, we're moving on now. I will give the word to Abraham Halef of the Social Democrats.
Thank you, Emil. And I would like to start thanking you for a very interesting and informative presentation at this seminar that the bicycle network in the Riksdag, together with the Swedish bicycle. The Netherlands is considered as a pioneer when it comes to the bicycling. At the same time, the other countries in Europe should follow it. In Sweden, much has been done for the bicycling, such as a national bicycling strategy. We have VTI, Cykelcentrum. We have bicycle streets. But it's not far from enough, and more needs to be done. In this, it's important that multiplates, regions, and the states work together to be able to increase bicycling in Sweden in the best possible way. In connecting with the infrastructure bill, it will be investigate whatever to have a bicycling target, and this is very welcome to us. It's important that the bicycling increase, but at the same time, it's even more important that the bicycling increase in a safe and equal way through the whole country, such as in the city and in the countryside. What I will be interested to hear more about is what Netherlands bicycling strategy looks like compared to the other countries in Europe. What do you think it's the parameters that it's made Netherlands so successful? Thank you.
Maybe Lucas, that's one for you because you have more international comparison on your perspective. So please take the floor, I think.
Yeah, and please also add Erik if you want to. Thanks very much, Abraham, and thanks very much also for all the others for your question. I think it's one of the ingredients from the past that is really essential from the Dutch perspective is this network approach of building out a network. I can maybe try very quickly to share my screen again that you can see. So the thinking of the network level and a couple of ingredients that we really try to redesign our streetscapes from what Erik was talking about from the 80s and the mid 90s onwards. That is a very, very important and I think a successful ingredient. And there's a couple of design characteristics attached to that. I won't go into that very deeply, but one other element I think related to this is very important that every bike plan also needs a car plan. So there's this holistic thinking in which we redesigned our cities and offered more space for cyclists and pedestrians and made a road categorization. I think those elements, traffic circulation plans are essential for the success of cycling in Dutch cities. Maybe I leave it with that to keep it very short. There's much more to say, but maybe Erik wants to add something.
Maybe one small add. I told you also in the presentation that we have like a national ambition, which is not the ambition of the government, but for all the parties involved on national level to increase these 20%. but what gives space also for own organization to have their own goal, which fits their possibilities of where they are responsible for. So our state secretary said, I will take this goal in 4 years for 200,000 extra commuters on the bike. So I think it's also being a bit, try to find something where a lot of parties can get their own ambitions in. And that's, maybe it's a bit Dutch, I don't know. You can maybe reflect on that, how that works in Sweden, but this is a thing which helps us in the Netherlands.
Thank you very much, very inspiring. Now it's time for Maria Stockhaus from the Moderate Party.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very interesting presentation. We have the infrastructure, like we have an infrastructure in place, and as Jens said, it's mainly targeted towards car traffic, and it's a challenge to make it more bicycle friendly and to make it possible for cars and bikes to coexist, and to make it safe for, especially for people on bikes. And I think it's important that the bikes, when you plan a new infrastructure, that bikes actually has a stronger position when we plan a new infrastructure. I think the biggest challenge for us is we have existing infrastructure with our cities and city plannings and roads that we need to convert so that both the cars can still be move there, but also make it a safe and a good opportunities for cycling as well. And also I think it's important that the intermodality, that you won't, like a lot of people might be able to commute through bikes all the way to work, but it could also be that you take the bike to a commuter train station and then you take the train. And that's also important to make it easy to make that choice, not because not everybody might be comfortable of taking the bike all the way to work, but even though more and more people are doing that. And I'm a little bit curious. I have to ask one question. There was a lot of discussions through email about safety on bikes and people dying on bike-related accidents. And I saw that in none of your pictures, there was nobody with a helmet, not even small babies on bikes, which is surprised me. And I think helmets might be a good way of saving lives in the Netherlands, but I'd be interested to hear your take on helmets and how that's regarded in the Netherlands. And also, I think a lot of the infrastructure involved with bicycles involve the local governments, and I've seen good examples and some very, very bad examples that make people very irritated and angry of how you put up bike lanes and try and correct the infrastructure. How does that support to your local governments? How does that look? Because I think that's very important for Sweden, that the local governments get better support on how they can build their like bike lanes or whatever, and make it more safe for bikers, because there's some really bad examples out there, and I think they need a lot of help. Thanks.
Maybe Lucas, you do the first part.
Sure.
The helmets, and I do the second part about.
Yeah, sure. Sounds perfect. Thanks very much, Maria, for your questions. That's a very important one. It's also the helmet question is really a tricky one that's being asked very often. As you saw in the pictures, there's almost nobody wearing a helmet in the Netherlands. It's totally not part of our culture in a way, but it's also a complicated one to answer. I think it's good to know that we have a combination of a world-beating safety record with the world's lowest helmet usage rate in the Netherlands, and that's because the fact that the true safety of our infrastructure lies in a way that it's really in a sort of forgiving way it's being designed. There's a lot of people cycling, which is the cycling in numbers, which relates also to traffic safety numbers, and it's also about the behavioral element, how we behave in traffic, how we totally ingrained, and how also the car traffic is accustomed to a lot of cyclists. But I think it's very important also here to point out the health benefits provided by cycling far outweighs the risks. And if there's a couple of studies, if we would mandating recommending helmets, then it would prevent people from cycling. And the positive health benefits, they have been calculated that the healthcare system will save for something like 19, almost 20 billion euros per year. So that's a very large number. Whereas if you it would save, like if you would have mandating helmets overall, it would save like in injuries and that sort of stuff, something like 75 million euros per year. So that's of course a large number, but if it doesn't outweigh the overall societal and health benefits of 19 billion euros. So it's also apart from the whole traffic safety system and how our streets are being designed, it's also a cost benefit picture that you can put into there. Maybe Erik, you want to add on that?
Yeah, maybe
Just
a small
short, Erik.
add on this. Okay, it's also people don't like to wear helmets in the Netherlands. I know it's different in Sweden, but it's really like if you would ask people on the streets, is it good to protect you? And then a lot of people say, almost everyone said, I will not do this. So it's also a cultural thing. So maybe if you have time left, Henk can say something more about that. Don't forget this. So it's just different. I cannot copy paste it. For the second part, I will keep it briefly. We have like an organization where people from all kinds of municipalities, but also other parties, they talk with each other on how idealistic the design of streets, but also of the bicycle infrastructure should be. And they put up then, after long talking, some kind of document saying this should be ideal. And it's not obligated to use this, but in a sense, because people talked about it themselves, they use it also in their own municipality or in the province. And that helps to make it more general for the whole country, that it more looks the same. But it leaves room also for special own design in own municipalities.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll give the word to Patrik Jönsson from the Swedish Democrats.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Was it me? Yeah, I hope you can hear me. I have some kind of connection problems. Well, I thank you very much for our interesting presentation and how to see how it works out in Netherlands. And I think it's important to not use the whip. I prefer the carrot to get people biking. And to do that, you can't stop the wind, you can't stop the rain or take away the hills, but you can do fast cycle paths. You can get safer place to park the bike. You could, as a company, have a good place to change clothes and to take a shower. And I think also it's good to inform the citizens about the health, the people's health. It's better for the people, the condition, the muscles and so on to move. Often you sit at work and don't do any kind of body work, and then it's very good to move instead of taking the car to or from the work. And I think also when you put in money in the system, it's very important to catch the low-hanging fruits, to put them there. A lot of people have the possibility to bike in cities, and the distance are less than 5 kilometers. And also when you plan the city, you must take more care of the people who bike, so they can get separated ways from the cars to decrease injuries. And also I have a question for my Netherlands friends. All those money you put in, can you see a result of more people that take the bike when you create new cycle paths?
Something for Erik, maybe?
I will do, and if we will see if you add up something with your international experience, do it for that. For instance, also from the national level, we sometimes, it's not structural, we co-finance regional cycling routes between villages. And when we do this, it's also parliament members who, for instance, ask to do this. So then we ask to propose municipalities these plans or provinces. But when we co-fund these routes, we also want research before and after in how the change of cycling behavior has been. So this gives us also insights. It's growing up how it works. So this helps, I think, also to find for next phases best answers on which routes will work, which not, and what works. So maybe this helps also.
Yeah, and we see to add up on that, we see in many instances that the new routes that are being placed there, that they are really effective, and that the cycling share of the number of people that are using a bike on a certain route is going in sort of an increasing mode. So that's very helpful, that monitoring and evaluation, which Erik pointed out to.
That's maybe let's keep it small.
I think we have to move on now. I'm sorry. I will give the word now to Anders Åkesson from the Center Party.
Thank you so much for this lunch break-up session about bicycling. First of all, I will say I'm very glad to hear that you trust on the 3 levels of parliaments and politicians, the national, the regional, and the local. I think it's necessary, if we will see results of both money and rules, that we will engage all levels, because the local politicians is much closer to the people who we want to start bicycling than we are if you compare with us national politicians. So I'm glad for that. Thank you. And I have a question. You were talking about hardware, software, and orgware. Will you please develop this orgware a bit? I think I know what you are meaning, but will you please develop what's in the box of orgware? Perhaps the key, some of the keys to do what we want to do is that, as I understand, a meeting place for different actors in the society. So please, will you develop that? Thank you.
I will do something for the national perspective and maybe Lucas for the international. I think I try to explain that it's not so black and white that we have a box of software and orgware. It's a bit the same people, and orgware, it has to come together. And I think it's maybe some cultural reflections, but I always say, if you put a table in a square in the Netherlands and you put some chairs with it, as natural, people will sit on this table and start to talk with each other. And this is something we have even a word for. It's called polderen of the landscape, because you have to do this to keep your dry feet. And it's some kind of in our system. So we saw that even if responsibility for bicycle is on the local level, also on the national level, you need something. So it helps that our state secretary has these cycling goals, because sometimes on a local level, it can be difficult because some people or parties are not so interested and they are not enthusiastic. But if we have some kind of national goal and also sometimes some money, then sometimes this helps to get up the ambition. So we see that we have to work together, even knowing that even in The Hague, we are quite far from practice, but even symbolic role can help to give inspirations up.
Thank you so much. I think we will have to move on. We have 3 speakers left, and then we are receiving a lot of comments. We will take those after 1 o'clock. So I give the word now to Jakob Forssmed of the Christian Democrats.
Thank you so much, Emil, and thank you so much for interesting presentations. It's been very inspirational, and also to see that the infrastructure and transportation are not a one-way street, that you can actually change the way we transport ourselves into more of cycling. I think that is just great and wonderful. And the health aspects, of course, along with the environmental aspects are strong, as well as the freedom aspects for kids that see that in the recent years have seen their spaces shrink instead of expanding. And I think that's very important as well. Of course, you discuss many things that you have done in a broad agenda for stimulating cycling, but I would like to ask, because it's a little bit frustrating sometimes in Sweden with these issues, what has been the most significant positive tipping points in this in this development for you? What have you been able to see this as a landmark where we can actually see when we did this policy change, or we did this this argument change in the debate or something like that? What has been the most has led to the most impact that has broadened the way for the agenda? That is my question. Thank you.
Maybe Lucas, you give some feedback because you have more international comparison, and that helps. And I maybe add up something.
Sure. That's a brilliant question, and also a difficult one to address, but I can give a try. Based on the historical perspective, I think it all started, and Erik has looked upon it, but I can again maybe very shortly share my screen. I think it all started in the 70s, and crucial was that we just started it, and that we started experimenting, and we have been overhauling streets again and again because things didn't work at first. So it was really starting small in a couple of cities, and then based on that experience, we have been building what I referred to earlier, this whole network of inclusive and separated bike infra, which is really sort of the cornerstone. Build a couple of 5 principles. That was sort of the layout. I can later on, if you want, I can go deeply into these 5 elements. But as said also before, very crucial also have been that it is not only about facilitating cycling, but it has sort of a holistic approach in which you take the cycling as a very powerful, important ingredient in the total mobility policy, and in which you also look at car. And so every bike plan needs a car plan, which I was referring to earlier. I think that's a very integral element as well. And maybe last but not least, the bike train or bike transit combination, which Erik also referred to earlier on. 50% of all our train journeys start with a bike ride, and a lot of egress trips, so the last part of the trip coming from the station toward the end destination, there's also a significant rise in the use of the bike train combination. And I think that's a very powerful element as well that makes up that cycling is a fantastic alternative for the car. Erik, do you want to add something?
Only small, because of limited time. The bike train combination overcome us a bit, if I tell you. 2 years ago, we opened up the largest bicycle parking space of the world. It's in the city of Utrecht. I think 15,000 bikes can be parked there, and it's only 1 of 4 biking parkings around the station. And it sounds a bit strange because it just overcome us because people used it, liked it, and use it more and more every year. And these bikes popped up everywhere around stations. And then I think Dutch system works that we see a problem coming up. You don't have like grand schemes. Maybe you do it in France, for instance, but we always try to keep up with things happening. What shall we do? And then try out, do something. And that's, I think, the way of coming forward. And that's, I think, also the culture, how we try to solve things. Persistent in small steps, coming forward, I think.
Great, thanks. Okay, Helena Gellerman of the Liberals.
Yes, thank you. I first want to thank you very, very much for an interesting presentation. I do believe in exchanging experiences and see what you have done and what we have done, and what conclusions we can draw from that. And many things have been asked, but I want to focus on cooperation and also on traffic safety. I mean, one thing is for us politicians to build, to build a bike network and so on and make it safe. But how do you promote people to start biking? With the numbers that we want to promote people to use the bike, children, but also commuting to work. How do we go about doing that? And when I heard your presentation, one thing that stuck in my mind was the talk about bike ambassadors. If I understood it right, you have 17 companies that are promoting bikes among their employees. I would be very interesting. I think that's an interesting way of going about promoting biking. And it would be very interesting if you could elaborate a little bit on that, and also What have you seen? Have you seen any results yet? That there are more employees, and what incentives do they have? My second question is about safety, and I think it's really interesting that you have these so much separated bike lanes, which is a very good thing for safety. And could you give us some advice? What are the best policies to promote bike safety from your point of view? Thank you.
Maybe I do the first one and Lucas, you the second. Is that good? The bicycle ambassadors, we came up with that because from the national point of view, you can have an ambition, but we don't have really tools to, in practice, do something. So we found out, how shall we do this? And then we thought there are already companies who from themselves have good facilities and good practices and good examples of how they try to get their employees to work on a bike. So we came into contact with them, and they have, for instance, also some fiscal arrangements, which we from the national point of view are responsible for, they use, but some use them quite well. Well, it's not good much, and others use them less. So even between companies, there are differences. So we thought if we have good examples of companies and organizations, they can spread the word maybe better than we, and we have to be in contact with them to learn from each other how you can evolve in trying to get your employees on work. So they are their own ambassadors, but also our ambassadors. And we saw that in these organizations, this is also not always the topic first on their mind. But if a state secretary invites the CEO every year to come to explain what they are doing, then it becomes more priority. So it's like helping each other and inspiration and learn from each other. I think that is the example how we try to do it. And we have also other programs for children to learn bicycle, refugees coming to the Netherlands, elder people to drive safely on a bike. But yeah, that's a different perspective. That's the first part, maybe.
Yeah, and then thanks very much, Erik. Thanks also, Helena, for the question. Then very quickly, the second part of the question, I think it's key to have this safe network of bike lanes in the Netherlands, and also the traffic calm streets, which I referred to also earlier. So this is a combination of those both elements. And we have these 5 design principles, which I also refer to very shortly. And I could give a long talk about those 5 design principles. I won't do that, but I think one is very important. It's the whole network. And I think we see in many cities around the world that it's not a sort of a network principles, but sometimes there's links being added. And then the weakest link is always the intersection design. So there are some new parts that go from one place to another place, but then suddenly at an intersection, you are totally out of the open. So I think that's the crucial element, to have a cohesive network design in which you also aim for instance, the design of the intersections in a very safe and comfortable manner.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, finally, it's Emma Berginger from the Green Party.
Thank you very much, and thank you for very interesting and inspirational talks on bicycling. I have followed the bicycling issues in Sweden from a municipal level, when I was formerly the deputy mayor of Lund. I was in charge of the traffic planning in Lund, and Lund is one of the best cities in Sweden when it comes to bicycling. But still, we have a long way to go. And now I'm part of a member of parliament and a part of the infrastructure committee. What has struck me is that, and I'm a bit surprised that on national level, it's quite, well, people are not regarding bicycling issues as that important, and I knew that, of course, from the beginning. But I have also noticed that there are a lot of resistance towards moving forward when it comes to bicycling policy. For example, one or a few of my colleagues talked about the goals, and now in the infrastructure bill we have announced that there will be a goal, and we as the Green Party, we have worked quite a lot to achieve that sentence in the infrastructure bill that says that we are going to have a goal finally. On municipal level, a lot of municipalities in Sweden, they have goals already, and regions have goals, but on national level, no goals so far. And also when it comes to investments, I have plenty of colleagues that are saying that, but this is a municipal question. And when I talk to my colleagues on a municipal level, they all say, we need more money, we need more investments to be able to create these fantastic bike lanes that we see that we need to promote bicycling. So one of my questions to you is how to gain this support for the bicycling issues. I mean, it seems for me that you have a very broad support, both from citizens, but also between different political parties in the Netherlands for the bicycling issues. And it's, I think that's something that we need to see come forward in Sweden as well. And then I'm actually quite interested in those design principles and other design policy that you have in Netherlands to make sure that you get this very great looking bike lanes and separated network. And you said it was fully separated, but I realized when I visited Utrecht and surrounding cities that it's not always fully separated, because you share it with pedestrians as well, sometimes at least. So could you please explain a bit more about your design principles and what's important to get your fantastic bike lanes? Thank you.
I think I will do the first part again. Lucas, and you the second. Is most like we have to understand always this way. I think what's also good in mind is that I've lived in Sweden for a while. I visited Lund. I was really struck by the amount of people on a bike there. It felt like being in Holland, for my opinion. And the tax system in the Netherlands is quite different than in Sweden. We have mostly national tax income, and municipalities and provinces have quite small tax base, and that's totally different than in Sweden. So doesn't fit the situation we have for you, but what we see is that because I told in the presentation, the responsibility for bicycle infrastructure is decentralized a long time ago to the municipalities, and they got also money from the national government, but it was not money labeled for cycling infrastructure. It was labeled as a budget they could use for their own priorities they have to make. So it's a lump sum they get from the national government for a lot of things, and then they have to decide what they think is important. So I think that's good to bear in mind. That is a different context. But what I think, then it's maybe if we have a culture of cycling, it's not there just easily, it has been evolved. And in a lot of different parties, that's quite common sense, even in parties which were more originally car-minded, even there, it's quite logic that in city centers, the pedestrian and the cyclist are first in combination with public transport, and cars are quite difficult, but it's step-by-step evolving instance. So it does not fit one-on-one on each other, but it's a bit looking how we can learn from this different perspectives.
Okay, I think you have like 20 seconds, Lucas.
Okay, then I very quickly go ahead and show this again, because it's not only about separated bike infra, it's in many instances like the Utrecht example that you noted for, it's also about traffic calm streets in which the pedestrians, the cyclists, and mostly the motorists come together. I can tell a lot more about it, maybe in a separate session, but there's a lot to say about the design principles, intersection design, and the way we traffic calm our cities.
That's great, and please stay around, those of you who can. We have a lot of great questions in the comments that we will go through. I think I will start with a question to you, Henk, right after 1 o'clock. But to all the panelists here today, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for the presenters. We will formally end the webinar now, and those of you who have the possibility to stay, please hang around. Thank you so much.
I will hang around.
Please do. Okay, so I think I will let the recording keep going. I hope that's okay for everyone. Henk, you live in Sweden. You've been cycling all through Europe. What do you think, from your perspective, because you know the differences, what would be sort of the first priority for Swedish decision makers, do you think?
Well, I of course I know about the Swedish system, and there is in Sweden basically in every housing development built after the mid-1960s, there is excellent bicycle infrastructure at the sub-local level, just connecting streets and houses, and which is used very intensively by children in particular. But the main problem is that these clumps of cycling infrastructure, which are extremely local, they are not even municipal, they are just on the level of housing development, that they are disconnected, that they are not always connected to the towns, that it's difficult to build a cycling path, a cycling route in Sweden, which is not immediately adjacent to a road for motorized traffic, which is related, of course, to the specific Swedish financing regulations for who is going to pay for building the cycling infrastructure. Also, in my experience, there is little room in Sweden for what we would call a tactical urbanism, ad hoc measures, pilots experience. In the beginning, somebody mentioned the cycling measures related to the COVID crisis, when people wanted to or needed to avoid public transport, particularly in bigger cities. And many people don't own cars. And if all those people who did own cars would have taken the cars, it would have led to immense gridlock. So therefore, in cities like Paris and London and Milano and Barcelona and Bogota and Berlin and everywhere, introduced ad hoc measures. In the Netherlands, we didn't, basically because it was not really needed. Sweden didn't either, probably because it was not possible. Because of the way the legislation and the regulation works in Sweden, but it is a missed opportunity, because it would have eased the pressure of the pandemic on mobility and transport. Now that I have the floor, I want to react to one question in the chat, which was about Gothenburg. Being having hills and wind and rain and all that. I think Emma mentioned Lund. Not many people know, but Lund is the hilliest city in Sweden, and still it has a very high cycling modal proportion. So it is possible. Hills and wind you can do something about. Rain is harder. And there, nobody has mentioned it, but the electric bicycle is going to be a game changer, because the rain, it will not stop, but it will enable you to fight hills, to fight the wind, and it will increase the range of the average cyclist with about 100%. It will double your range. Somebody who now is cycling 7 or 10 kilometers to work will easily do 10 or 20 kilometers to work with an e-bike, and therefore I think it's a great decision of the Swedish government to try to further stimulate the take-up of e-bikes. It's really going to be a game changer. I don't know exactly the numbers in Sweden, but more than half of car trips are shorter than 7 kilometers, and they will easily be replaced by e-bikes, and that will be good for climate, public health, livable cities, all of that.
And
we're
in
on
the
the right side of
Netherlands,
history.
Of all countries, we've seen a lot of e-bikes.
We
Erik,
were a bit earlier, yes.
Yeah, sure. Erik, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, maybe short. The e-bike, I didn't mention that. It's good to say, because half of every bike, half of every my English is now lacking. Every bike which is being sold in the Netherlands, half of it is electric now, and it's one of the reasons.
Every other bike.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. This is one of the reasons that also the more regional bicycle infrastructure is now coming up at more speed. We have a good bicycle infrastructure in cities, in villages, also quite in between. But to have these e-bikes for like 15 to 25 kilometers, you need broader cycle paths with less conjunctions where you have to stop. And we are building them now. And this is also the plan for 2040, that it should be a comprehensive network in the Netherlands. And this is done. We are densely populated. So for us, it's a good alternative to the car, the traffic jams, and also the combination with bikes, e-bikes and train. That's our good alternative for the car. So I think, yeah, that could be add up also.
There's a lot of comments about safety, and I think we should address that perhaps a bit more. What are your sort of main, to improve cycling safety, what are your main measures in the Netherlands? Maybe
Lucas, can you maybe do this, or shall I do?
Right.
What shall we do?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I can try to do a first step, and then you can add on, Erik, if you and also Henk, of course. Yeah, of course, that's an issue. I did see in the comments also somewhere something about safety numbers. We see some rise in the number of people that are getting injured, but it's also mainly due to the fact that the population that is using the bike is getting older. So the proportion, the demographics of cycling use is changing in a bit. And it's also due to the fact that the pedelec or the e-bike, which we just discussed, is becoming more and more ingrained into the daily activities of the elderly population. So people are getting more healthy up to an elderly age and are still able to use the bike up into their 70s and sometimes into their 80s. So we see a lot of new bicyclists up to high age using the e-bike, and it's not so much that they are risky in their behavior, but they are at risk because they are more fragile, and there's a lot of one-sided accidents related to this elderly population, and that's due to the fact that people are falling off their bikes or just when stepping up of the bike there's a problem. And we have a lot of interesting programs. I think, Erik, maybe you can tell about that kind of elements like doortrappen and other things that are coupled to that.
Yeah, or more in practice, because it's totally right what you say, Lucas, is that maybe the figures think it's rising, but it's then the assumption is that this is rising because people on the bike had an accident with a car and we have to improve bicycle lanes separately from the cars. But actually it's rising because all the people have these accidents because they step up on the bike or off and they fall. My parents, for example, they are now becoming a bit older, they have some diseases, and my father last week fell off his bike just at home. And if he would have fallen quite hard, he had to go to the hospital and it would be marked as, oh, bicycle accident. But it has nothing to do with infrastructure. It was when he came home. And so look good at the amounts and then have good analysis and then do what really helps. That's, I think, first. So to add up, also from the national level, this is being debated in Parliament, of course, because no one wants to have fatalities or injuries. But we also say it has something to do with learn people who get older to get safe on their bike. It sounds a bit strange maybe, but my father is going to the physiotherapy, and there one of the practice he does is to get on his bike. And it's not because he has asked for this, it's just because the physiotherapist in the village thinks, yeah, these people have to bike, it's important, and I see this more, so let's do this. So you could practice also other things, but this is like so integrated in everything that it's also a solution. And we have also from a national point a program where we try every municipality to get some kind of program to do this. So it works a bit like the cycling ambassadors. Give the good examples of municipalities who have these programs, let them learn from each other. And our minister, actually not our state secretary, is really fond of this plan, and she gives every year also a lot of attention to this program. So it works a bit the same, but from a different perspective and different issue.
Can the infrastructure in the Netherlands improve in terms of safety? and how will that happen?
I will do short, but Lucas, also you have good examples. It can, because I said the Corona has shown that it's getting also busier on the bicycle lanes, not from commuters because they work at home, but even in free time, people have to do something, so they get more on the bike and walking. So we see, and it was a longer trend, that even the bicycle path we have, which for you perspectives are maybe quite nice, but in the Netherlands they are maybe coming their own failure of success because they get so busy that it gets, even after a certain point, you get more accidents because it's too busy. It's a luxury problem, but it's really getting a problem now. So this is also one of the maybe the stepping points, if we look back in maybe 10 or 20 years, that yes, Corona was the time that they thought, now we have to make this cycling infrastructure to the second phase. It has to be broader, more connected, safer. So this is, yeah, I will repeat myself. We will see how it works, but this is a thing which we still can improve.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. Almost nothing to add there. I think I earlier referred to these 5 design principles that's based on the CRWO, the CROW principles, and we have a guidebook there. And some of these principles are already like 20 or 30 years old. And I see what Erik was saying, like pre-Corona, we had a lot of uptake in the number of cyclists, which was enormous. In some cities like Utrecht and Amsterdam, we had traffic bicycle jams at traffic lights. So yeah, there's a second phase and then more broadening and widening of the elements, and maybe also reconfiguring the existing principles, the 5 principles that are still fantastic tools for other countries and cities, but we maybe have to move to a next phase.
Maybe we can learn from Lund, because it felt a bit like being in Holland in Sweden with a lot of bicycles. So take the city in Sweden where they have the most people using the bike and they have their new problems, and learn from that how you can overcome them and help them a bit, give them some show off or something. I would be my advice, and then yeah, it could be inspiring also for other cities maybe.
Great. Okay. Another question is about sort of your national objective. You have the objective is to increase cycling by 20% in 10 years. Do you have any studies on sort of the potential in cycling? Because we have a lot of recent studies in Sweden about the regional potential, saying that a certain number of the population could cycle to work within 15 or 30 minutes. What is sort of the scientific base for that objective?
I leave this to you, Lucas, because you
Sure.
are a doctor. I'm not a doctor, so.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of potential, of course, and it doesn't come out of thin air. This objective of 20%, and I think it was noted before by Henk. The big majority of all small car trips are up to, I think, 5 kilometers. So there's still, and even in the Netherlands, the car is being used for a lot of small short trips. So there is a lot of potential, and what we usually do when we, as the cycling embassy, go to other countries, we use a tool to measure the trip distances in certain cities. We call that the Move Meter tool, in which we see what percentage of all trips is being transferable towards the bicycle in theory. And then we see also when you redesign the streetscapes of the city and implant a network which is really safe and comfortable and inviting for people to use with their bike, then you see this modal shift actually happen, and you see a lot of these very short car trips being transferred to the bike. And the fantastic, as noted before, of course, you have the short trips, but you also now, due to the fact of the e-bike, mentioned already before, it's a fantastic range extender. So this potential is even larger now. And based on the room that we still have in the Netherlands, in the sense that the potential room, we base this 20% increase of, which is a fantastic ambition. But we can even go further than that, I think, in the far future.
What about cars then? You mentioned the circulation plans, which a lot of Dutch cities have adopted, which sort of makes it relatively faster to use the bicycle instead of other modes of transport. why would people use the bicycle instead of the car in the Netherlands in terms of sort of taking the next step in increasing cycling, getting more people to get rid of the car and use the bicycle instead? How is that going to happen?
Various
You do
reasons.
it,
I don't know. Oh. Yeah, there's of course various reasons. I think it's for many people that are already using the bike, it's totally ingrained into their daily activity from a childhood experience onwards. So a lot of people don't think about it. It's just a regular element of their daily life, daily commutes, going to the shop, the grocery stores, and bringing their kids to schools, etc., etc. And we see that there's still room, and for instance, if there's a lot of congestion on the road, people are stuck in traffic congestions, and they see the bikes flying by, for instance, on these new fast routes between small cities in the Netherlands, between the new routes that are being created. People are more aligned towards moving over, but it's also about inviting them and teasing them, and that relates back to the programs that Erik was mentioning about these ambassador programs of employers who try to trick their employees to use their bike more often. Children programs really focusing at children moving the bike more often. So it's really a cocktail of various variations, various elements, that ingredients that you have to focus on. Yeah.
I'm a bit
Erik.
curious maybe, because I lived in Stockholm quite a long time ago, and I was astonished by the public transport system when I lived there. And I have learned that it was really a choice in the 50s, I think, to make the public transport system the main focus of transportation in the metropolitan area. So I was really astonished by that. But in Holland, we don't really have this. Then mostly the bike is coming up together with the train system. And what I've seen is that even if the subway is very well, a lot of people come by bus or walking to the subway station, and I see quite less bicycle to that station. While in Holland, people take the bike for their means to go to the station. I was looking at it, is this really, I understand that public transport system was a choice, but the bicycle combined with this system, is this being thought of, or is it ignored, or how should I look at this?
I think Sweden could definitely learn from you because you have such a great number of cycling trips to and from train stations. And I think that could be, for smaller towns especially, like a big potential. We have a question about the support from city businesses for the transformation to more cycling in city cores. What have sort of they said during this transformation? Have they been supportive, or have they been against taking away spaces from car and giving it to bicycles? And do you have any programs or any such thing to cooperate with them?
Shall you do this, Lucas, or?
If you want to, you're free. Yeah, go ahead, Erik.
I gave one example. If I understand the question right, is that what was the opposition of maybe parties in the city if you get cars out and cyclists? And I have an example of the city of Utrecht. It's now maybe one step before. It goes step by step, like I told. That's a bit the Dutch way, I think. It's not the grand plan and then once we do everything. It's more step by step, trial and error. And I think every 10 years or 15 years, the design of a street is being redone. It's maybe a bit exaggerate, but we are constantly doing this. And by every step, you can make a small step in a certain direction. So in Utrecht, there was the example that they had a part of the city center, where in the 60s, they put out the canal, the water, and they made a highway into it. In that time, quite logic, also internationally seen. Then, like maybe 10 years ago, they decided, well, this should not be a highway anymore. Maybe we can make water in again, because we like more the bicycle and the pedestrians as a main way of transporting in the city. So also nearby there was a street with shops and restaurants, and this was the gateway to the city center. And the local government said, well, we have to transform this too. So at both sides there are cars. So let's put out one side with cars, and pedestrians and cyclists can walk in, for example, in the broader perspective. And then the restaurant keepers at the other part said, where the cars would stay, that we don't want cars in front of our door, because all our people who are going to us, they are walking the other side of the road. They come not to our restaurant. So then it transformed that in all the days they would have said, we don't want to get rid of these cars. And then they said, we want to get rid of these cars because we are losing money. So it's like step by step, this thinking is transformed. So it comes into your own advantage. And I think that's the way things work in the Netherlands.
I will give the word to Henk. I will just let everybody know that we will stop at latest at 1:30. We have perhaps a few questions left, but Henk, you would like to comment.
There's also some international research which proves that it is better for local business on shopping streets if cars are banned, because on average pedestrians and cyclists will spend more. With the car, you go to the supermarket, you throw it full, and you drive home again. But if you are on a bicycle or by foot, then you can stop at each and every shop. And that's small towns in the Netherlands. There is still a living main street with small shops, with a bakery, a butcher, and a greengrocer, which has basically disappeared from Sweden. And even in a city like the size of Helsingborg or Lund, it is very, very hard for shopkeepers, cafes, and restaurants in the city centers to stay afloat, because people go by cars to huge shopping centers outside the cities. So it's also a way to keep your cities alive, and to keep city centers on a human scale. But there is international research which proves that removing cars is rather good for business than bad for business. Maybe not for IKEA, but for the smaller shopkeeper or restaurant owner. Yeah.
Maybe a small ad. Before I worked for the government, also for the Dutch Ahold chain, supermarket chain, and it's they had also cycling supermarkets, they call it, mostly in student towns like Lund, but then in the Netherlands you have routes where a lot of students bicycle from university campus to home or city center. So it's like everyone uses this route, and the supermarket chain saw at this route we have to open supermarkets with a good bicycle facility in the front, and these shops are always a success. So every student city has a few of this supermarket. So you see, then it's getting into the advantage to know this, to use this, and then you can earn money about it.
Really interesting. Okay, I think now it's time for a final audience question, and then I will sort of let you have a final comment after that question before we close down the session. In Sweden, there's when you talk about we should get more people cycling, there's always this saying that no, everybody can't ride a bicycle. And we have in the audience here today a person who is riding a wheelchair bicycle. And since you have this Dutch cycling culture where everybody cycles, how is that sort of working out? Do you see a lot of people using wheelchair bicycles or similar vehicles?
Maybe I have some personal experience with that. I'm not in a wheelchair, but my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, cannot walk that well. So for longer distances, she needs a wheelchair. And my father-in-law really likes cycling as doing something when he's free. They are med pension, they have a lot of time. So they are really looking for a solution that first they did it like one in the front and one in the back, like I forgot the name in English, but it's not possible anymore. So that now they found a bicycle where you can put your wheelchair in front, and my father-in-law bicycles with the electric engine because it's quite heavy, but it's doable. So now they can go out together again, bicycling in summertime to have relaxation. And it was still a bit of a search, what works, what not, but it's available. And people do this, and I really like this because they enjoy now this going out together, and I think that's the quality of life which the bicycle is a means for that, but it really works.
And is it common?
Maybe I can add to that. I have a fantastic personal experience from Erik. It's for people that are having disabilities or having immobility, so to say. There's a lot of opportunities. And one example I can maybe share. I think they only have via the chat a Dutch website, but you can see a couple of pictures of, for instance, what we call a four-wheeler. And that's really accustomed to people that are having disabilities. Amongst these small segments to make cycling much more inclusive, this is a fantastic solution. There's also three-wheeler options or other options which Erik referred to. But yeah, there are definitely those options in the Netherlands that have a place on our bike lanes and bike infra.
But maybe to add
but
on,
it does require adequate infrastructure.
Absolutely.
The bike lane cannot be too narrow.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what I would add. I get from my father-in-law now. You work for the ministry for bicycle infrastructure, but with this wheelchair bicycle, it's quite hard for me. So can't you do something about it? So also for personal experience, I would have sent it, Henk.
Okay, great. And the website for those who are listening to this afterwards, I will say it in Swedish. It's 4 number 4 WIELER.nl, fourwheeler.nl. Okay, so just we will end up. Perhaps a final round of thoughts, if you have anything that you would like to add or so. Lucas, would you like to start? Do you have something?
No, thanks very much for the fantastic organization, Emil. Really a great honor to be able to be part of this, and looking forward to any follow-up. If you want to have any follow-up, please feel free to contact us. And I think, Emil, you will share our contact details also afterwards.
Will do.
Thanks.
Erik, do you have anything?
It's totally the same for me. It was really a pleasure to be invited to talk with you. And if it would be possible, I would really like to learn also from you. So if you have good examples where you're proud of, I would like to receive them and see what we can do with that. So
we should start a Swedish cycling embassy. Okay, Henk.
Yes, we have been talking a lot about infrastructure. And there is a lot of cycling infrastructure in Sweden, but it is not used as much as it could be used. So what I would say is don't only focus on infrastructure, but also focus on policies that will stimulate cycling, get children, school children, get them on bicycles. In the Netherlands, it's part actually of the school curriculum that you learn to cycle and that you learn to take care of your safety when cycling, just like swimming is, and swimming is in Sweden probably as well. I see a lot of empty bicycle infrastructure in Sweden. Maybe it was built in the wrong place. Maybe there are other reasons why it's not being used. But it's not only build it if build it and they will come, because sometimes you have built it and still they didn't come, and then you have to ask yourselves, why don't they come? And I think there will be some interesting answers there.
What a great way to end.
Thank you. And we'll be in touch, Emil.
Yeah, for sure. Emma, Patrik, all the other people here, would you like to say something final?
Yeah, I can start. I would very much like to thank all the panelists once again. It has been a pleasure to listen to all this experience from the Netherlands. And we will try to continue our work towards making Sweden a more bicycle-friendly place. I hope that all of my colleagues from the Parliament, not only from Riksdagens cykelnätverk, but also from Parliament, will help in this work, and that we will get a lot of support for doing necessary changes in policy, putting up this ambitious goal for making sure that we work towards a more bicycling friendly Sweden, and also that we put enough money to making more infrastructure, and also, of course, promoting bicycling and this behavioral change that we need to see. Thank you.
Patrik?
Thank you. And yes, I think it's very interesting to see the different culture in Netherlands and Sweden. I think that's one of the issues. And to let the children bike to the school instead of driven by the parents in a car, it's one way of getting the culture up in the ages so it stays there. And finally, I think there is also a problem to get us elder to take the bike, because you're probably grown up too much with the car. And it's good to take the bike, not only if you drink a Hogarten, it's also good for the health. So no, but I think it was very interesting, and I thank you very lot to get a part of this seminar.
Great. Thank you very much for joining up today. We will send out the presentations and the contact information to the presenters. I wish you all a good day and a rest of the week. Thank you very much.
Same to you. Bye-bye.